At exactly 6:47 in the morning on June 22nd, 1944, Saipan Corporal Thomas Sullivan crouched behind his Browning M2 heavy machine gun, watching a Japanese sniper move through tree cover 1,600 yards away. The distance every Marine believed was completely safe from American small arms fire. The 84-pound machine gun sat positioned for area suppression. Doctrine said the spray bursts at distant tree lines. Nobody tried to hit individual soldiers at that range. Tom was about to do something no one expected. He stopped thinking about bursts and started thinking like he was hunting white-tailed deer back in Iowa. Except deer didn't shoot back, and this deer had killed his best friend 2 days ago. The Japanese soldier moved with casual arrogance, standing in the cave mouth, lighting a cigarette in broad daylight. Completely safe because every manual said machine guns couldn't hit individuals at 1,600 yards. Manuals were written by people who'd never hunted at 400 yards and learned that physics didn't care what paper claimed was impossible. Through the improvised scope mounted on his M2, Tom could see the sniper clearly. The Arisaka rifle, the telescopic sight, the man settling behind a fallen log preparing to kill another Marine who'd never see it coming. Tom adjusted his breathing the way his father taught him at 12. Calculated bullet drop. 8 feet at this distance. Wind drift maybe 2 feet. Time of flight 1.7 seconds. The math was simple if you understood ballistics. The courage was harder because breaking doctrine meant risking court-martial or death, or both. But Jimmy Morales had died asking Tom to fix this, asking with his last breath to prove doctrine wrong when doctrine was killing people. Tom centered the crosshairs, accounted for drop and drift, squeezed gently. The M2 fired once, single shot, treating 84 pounds of machine gun like a precision rifle. The tracer arced through humid air. Red streak cutting jungle canopy, struck the log 6 inches left of the sniper. Wood exploded. The enemy soldier froze, stunned that American fire had reached him. He looked around frantically, then scrambled backward into the cave, abandoning his position. Bobby Chen stared. "Jesus, Tom, you almost got him." Almost. Tom already calculating the correction needed. Next time I won't miss. In the next 23 days, Tom would achieve 17 confirmed kills at ranges up to 1,850 yards, would force an entire Japanese battalion to change tactics, would nearly die from counter-sniper fire, would run out of ammunition with enemy counterattack coming, would prove that questioning assumptions save more lives than following orders. But understanding how an Iowa farm boy transformed an area weapon into the Pacific's deadliest precision instrument requires going back. Back to cornfields, where 12-year-old hands learned that killing deer at 400 yards meant understanding wind and patience. Back to May 28th, when Jimmy Morales saved Tom's life. Back to June 20th, when Jimmy died doing everything right, while doctrine failed to keep him alive. Thomas Sullivan grew up on 340 acres of Iowa farmland, where his father raised corn and white-tailed deer, populated woodlots between fields, stretching to horizons interrupted only by distant barns. Started hunting at 12, not for sport, but necessity. Deer meat fed the family through winter when farm income disappeared into debts for seed and equipment. His father taught him ammunition cost money, and wasted shots meant wasted dollars. Every cartridge had to count. You didn't spray lead hoping for luck. You calculated and aimed and made bullets do what physics demanded if you understood the mathematics. By 14, Tom could calculate bullet drop in wind drift while watching corn stalks bend. New 30-06 dropped 8 inches at 300 yards with 10-mile-per-hour crosswind, drifting at 4 inches right. New temperature affected powder burn, which affected velocity, which affected everything from muzzle to target. November 1932. Tom was 14, standing at a harvested cornfield edge with his grandfather's Winchester Model 70. Whitetail buck at 380 yards, too far for most hunters. His father stood beside him with a stopwatch because time mattered when deer moved and windows closed. Tom studied wind, watched smoke from a distant chimney drift east, estimated 8-mile-per-hour crosswind, calculated drop, 12 inches, wind drift 6 inches, aimed high and right, took a breath, let half out, squeezed, the buck dropped, single shot, clean kill. His father clicked the stopwatch. 47 seconds from sight to shot. That's thinking, not shooting. No, most hunters spray hoping. You calculated like solving mathematics. Ammunition costs money. Thinking costs nothing. Remember that? Tom remembered, would remember 12 years later when officers said machine guns couldn't hit individuals at an extended range because doctrine said so. Would remember that sometimes what costs nothing saves everything. December 7th, 1941. Tom was 23, working in the barn when his mother ran out shouting about Pearl Harbor, radio crackling with horror, Japanese attack, thousands dead, battleships burning. Tom enlisted December 10th. His father watched him sign papers, didn't try to stop him. That night, his father said, "War's different than deer. Deer don't shoot back. Remember, thinking still matters even when you're scared. Scared men who think survive. Scared men who panic die." Camp Pendleton, California, January through April 1942. 8 weeks of men screaming about discipline and following orders. Tom was assigned to heavy weapons, M2 Browning machine gun crew. The instructor was a staff sergeant from Kentucky. This machine gun is designed to stop trucks and airplanes at 1,800 yards maximum effective range. But individual soldiers, theoretical only. This weapon is for suppression. Spray and pray. Lay down covering fire. Keep enemy heads down while riflemen maneuver. That's doctrine. Tom listened but privately disagreed. 50 caliber BMG left the barrel at 2,900 feet per second, faster than any rifle round he had fired hunting. 710 grain bullet. Physics said a bullet that fast with that mass should hit targets at ranges the manual called theoretical if you calculate it properly. But challenging doctrine as a private got you kitchen duty. So Tom kept quiet and learned the manual while understanding the manual was incomplete. He met Jimmy Morales during training, shared a tent, became friends over discussions about marksmanship that lasted past lights out. James Morales from El Paso, Texas. Everyone called him Jimmy. 23, same as Tom, had married his high school sweetheart Sarah 2 weeks before shipping out. Carried her photograph everywhere. Would pull it out and stare like the image might disappear. Jimmy was the company's best rifleman. Could hit targets at 500 yards with his M1 when most struggled past 300. Understood shooting instinctively the way Tom understood it mathematically. Manual says M1 effective to 500 yards, Jimmy said one night, cleaning weapons. But I've hit 600, maybe 650 if conditions are right. Manual's written by people who test average soldiers. We're not average. Tom smiled. Same with M2. Manual says area weapon only. But physics says 50 BMG at 2,900 feet per second should hit individuals at 1,800 yards if you calculate drop. Nobody tries because doctrine says don't. Someday someone's going to get desperate enough to test what weapons actually do instead of what manuals claim, Jimmy said. Prophetic words. The friendship grew through late-night conversations about trajectory and wind reading, through planning post-war hunting trips that seemed both impossible and inevitable. Iowa for whitetail, Tom would say. Teach you cornfield hunting. Texas for mule deer, Jimmy countered. Bigger than whitetail. Different terrain. We could start a guide service. Sullivan and Morales. Take city people into wilderness. Make money doing what we love. Jimmy showed Sarah's photograph again. 20th time that week. She'd love that. Says she wants space and sky. Somewhere kids can grow up hunting and fishing. You two planning kids already. Planning everything. House, kids, business, whole life. Figure if I plan detailed enough, the universe has to let me survive to do it. They laughed, but both understood the fear underneath. That planning futures was how you coped with present dangers. May 15th, 1944. Tom's company hit Saipan Beach under Japanese mortar fire, killing 6 men before they reached trees. The island was volcanic rock and dense jungle. Coral ridges providing perfect concealment for defenders who'd been fortifying for months. Japanese held elevated terrain overlooking American positions. Their snipers were patient and skilled, would wait hours for a single high-value target. Marine officers, artillery spotters, radio operators, anyone whose death would disrupt operations beyond simple mathematics of one casualty. The snipers operated from 12 to 1,800 yards, positions they believed completely safe because American M1 rifles were only effective to 500 yards. Beyond that, American small arms couldn't reach them, so they moved casually, stood in cave mouths, lit cigarettes in daylight. In 48 hours, they killed 19 Marines. Private Johnson on May 16th, Corporal Davis on May 17th, Sergeant Williams on May 18th. Casualties accumulated with inexorable mathematics. Tom's M2 crew was positioned on Coral Ridge with good observation, could see Japanese positions through field glasses, but couldn't engage effectively because doctrine said suppress with bursts. Suppression didn't kill snipers, just made them hide, then return. Tom started studying positions during briefings, making mental notes, calculating ranges. That cave was 1,400 yards. That tree line, 1,600. That ridge, 1,800. Started thinking about ballistics, about how 50 caliber should reach those distances if someone calculated properly, if someone was willing to test theory, but kept quiet because questioning doctrine was how you ended friendships with sergeants. May 28, 1944, the day Tom's debt was created, the day that would make Jimmy's death unbearable because debts to men who saved your life can never be fully repaid. Tom's squad was providing security for a supply convoy. Standard duty, boring until something happened that reminded you the war didn't care about boredom. Japanese 105mm artillery started at 10:15. Random harassment fire, shells landing in patterns, the kind that killed more men than aimed shots because it was indiscriminate and constant. One shell landed 15 yards from Tom. Blast wave punched like an invisible fist, threw him sideways into volcanic rock. Shrapnel tore through his left thigh, severing femoral artery. He understood immediately he was dying. Blood pulsed dark and fast, arterial bleeding, fatal in 3 to 4 minutes. Tom tried applying pressure, couldn't reach properly, couldn't make his fingers work because shock was setting in and vision was tunneling. This is how you die. Not heroically, just randomly because a shell landed wrong. Jimmy appeared running through continuing artillery, not walking. Running upright across open ground while shells kept falling. Slid into the crater with his combat lifesaver kit already open. 14 minutes under fire. Jimmy worked while artillery continued. Tourniquet above the wound. Pressure dressing packed with gauze. IV fluids. His hands covered in Tom's blood, working with focused intensity. Tom's consciousness faded in and out. Remembers fragments. Jimmy's voice steady. Another round landing 8 yards away. Jimmy covering Tom's body with his own. Medics arriving. Being loaded on a stretcher. Jimmy walking alongside, refusing to leave. At the aid station, the doctor examined Tom's leg, looked at the tourniquet, looked at Jimmy. This saved his life. Femoral artery completely severed. Another 2 minutes he'd have bled out. Who applied it? Jimmy, sitting beside the cot, covered in Tom's blood. I did, sir. You have medical training. Combat lifesaver course, sir. Figured someone should know how to stop bleeding. The doctor looked at Tom. Your friend saved your life. Without immediate intervention, you'd be dead. Tom looked at Jimmy, throat too tight to speak. Finally managed, thank you doesn't seem enough. Jimmy showed Sarah's photograph. Must have been in his pocket while working on Tom. Thank you isn't necessary. Just means when we get home, you help me teach my kids to hunt Iowa style. Deal. Deal. Good, because I wasn't asking. You owe me your life now. Don't forget it. We're building that guide service. Sullivan and Morales, that's payment. Tom spent 3 weeks recovering. During recovery, Jimmy visited daily, brought food, shared letters from Sarah, made elaborate plans that seemed more real with each telling. June 2nd, Jimmy arrived with a letter he'd been reading repeatedly, hands shaking when he showed Tom. Sarah's pregnant, found out last week, due January 1945. Means I'm fighting for someone who doesn't even exist yet. Tom tried to find words. Means you have to survive 6 months. Get home, meet your kid. 6 months feels like forever. Every day's Russian roulette. You step wrong or Japanese sniper picks you or artillery lands on your position. You don't control any of it. Then we control what we can. Stay smart. Don't take stupid risks. Get home to Sarah and that baby. Jimmy showed a photograph Sarah sent, her sister's baby. This'll be mine in January. If it's a boy, I'm naming him Thomas, after you, because you're going to be there helping me teach him to hunt, to calculate bullet drop, all the things your father taught you. Tom's throat went tight. I'm honored. Means I have to survive too. Can't be godfather if I'm dead. Then we both survive. We both go home. We both build that business. That's the only acceptable outcome. They shook on it. Promise between friends. Something to survive for. June 10th, Jimmy was assigned observation post duty. Dangerous because observation posts were exposed positions watching Japanese lines. But Jimmy volunteered because he was the best shot, so it made sense. Tom said, be careful. Japanese snipers have been active. I'm always careful. Besides, they can't hit what they can't see, and I'm very good at not being seen. I'll be fine. June 19th, final conversation. Neither knew it would be final. Jimmy was taking observation post the next morning, position that would kill him, but they didn't know that yet. You know what bothers me most about this war, Jimmy said around midnight? It's not dying, it's dying stupidly. Following doctrine that doesn't work. Doing everything right and dying anyway because right doesn't match reality. If I don't make it home, I want it to be because I tried something and failed, not because I followed rules that got me killed. Dark talk for midnight. Realistic talk. You notice how many guys die doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Following doctrine exactly. Moving in proper formation. And doctrine doesn't account for enemy moving faster or having better position or just getting unlucky. Sometimes doing everything right still gets you killed because right was written by people who never faced this specific situation. So what's the alternative? Ignore doctrine completely. No, question it, test it, find what actually works versus what the manual says should work. Like your idea about M2 hitting individuals that long range. Manual says impossible, but physics says possible. Someday someone's going to be desperate enough to test it. Probably when they realize following doctrine means dying and breaking doctrine means maybe surviving. Prophetic words. Next day would prove exactly how prophetic. June 20th, 1944, 10:42 in the morning. The moment everything changed, Jimmy was manning observation post on Coral Ridge. Standard defensive position, sandbags, overhead camouflage, proper fields of fire, everything by the book, field telephone connected to command. Binoculars scanning Japanese positions 1,600 yards distant. Routine morning. Tom was on his M2 crew 200 yards behind, providing overwatch. Could see Jimmy's post through field glasses. Watched him adjust binoculars. Everything looked routine. At 10:37, Tom saw Jimmy through field glasses. Standard observation work. What Tom couldn't see was the Japanese sniper in a cave mouth 1,600 yards from Jimmy, who'd been watching through his scope for 20 minutes, waiting patiently for the American observer to present a clear target. Professional. Understanding that observation posts were high-value targets because killing observers blinded American artillery. The sniper knew the range precisely, had his Arisaka Type 99 zeroed for 1,600 yards. Wind was light, perfect conditions. He squeezed gently. At 10:42, Tom heard a single shot echo, saw Jimmy jerk backward, saw binoculars fall, saw Jimmy collapse and not move. Tom didn't think. Grabbed his medical kit, started running. 200 yards uphill across exposed coral. Bobby Chen yelling this was suicide. Tom didn't care. Jimmy had saved his life running through artillery. Debt must be paid. Reached Jimmy at 10:44, 2 minutes after the shot. Jimmy lay on his back, single gunshot wound center chest, blood spreading dark. The 7.7 millimeter round had entered below the sternum. Massive internal damage. Jimmy was still conscious, breathing wrong, bubbling sound meaning punctured lung. Eyes focused on Tom with terrible clarity. Jimmy, I got you. Medic's coming. You're going to be fine. Jimmy's hand gripped Tom's arm, weak but insistent. Liar, can feel it, lungs punctured, maybe heart damaged. I'm done, Tom. Don't talk, save your strength. Need to talk, not much time. Coughing blood. Tom, listen. That shot came from 1,600 yards. See that cave mouth northeast ridge? That's where he is, 1,600 yards. Tom looked, could see the cave mouth. I see it. American rifles can't reach that far. Manual says M1 effective to 500 yards. That sniper sits up there completely safe, picking us off, and we can't reach him. 3 Marines died from that position last week. Henderson, Kowalski, Rodriguez. Same sniper probably. Untouchable. Don't worry about that now. Jimmy's grip tightened. Listen, your M2, 50 caliber BMG, 2,900 feet per second muzzle velocity, should reach 1,600 yards easy if you calculate drop in wind. Physics says possible. Manual says area weapon only, but manual's wrong. You've said it yourself. You know the math, Tom. You've calculated trajectory since you were 12. Jimmy, please. No strength left. Promise me something. Don't let more guys die because doctrine says it's impossible to shoot back. You can reach 1,600 yards with that M2. Same principle as deer at 400, just longer distance. Promise me you'll try. Don't let them keep picking us off because the manual says machine guns only suppress areas. Fix it, Tom. Please fix it. Tom couldn't speak, could only nod while tears ran down mixing with sweat and coral dust. Jimmy pulled Sarah's photograph from his pocket. Blood stained the edges. Tell her I tried to do everything right. Tell her I love her and Thomas Jr. when he's born. Tell her I'm sorry I won't be there teaching him to hunt like we planned. I'll tell her. Sullivan and Morales Guide Service. Still going to happen. You take my name, teach my son, hunt with him. Make sure he knows his dad wanted him to understand that sometimes following rules gets you killed and questioning rules keeps you alive. Make sure Thomas Jr. understands that. I promise, Jimmy. On your life, I promise. Not on my life. Jimmy smiled through blood. On theirs. Everyone who comes after. Every Marine watching those ridges. Every observer in exposed positions. Fix it so they don't have to die the same way. Following doctrine. Doing everything right. Dying because right doesn't reach far enough. His breathing was getting shallower. Wrong in ways that meant the end was close. Tom, I'm here, buddy. Tell Chen he was right about doctrine. Tell him his brother Daniel at Tarawa was right too. Sometimes regulations kill more men than enemy fire. You fix it. I promise, I swear I'll fix it. Last breath at 10:51 a.m., 9 minutes after the shot, 9 minutes of consciousness, long enough to ask for promises, long enough to change everything Tom understood about duty. Tom sat holding Jimmy's body while medics arrived 3 minutes too late. The corpsman said quietly, he was dead before we could have reached him anyway. Internal bleeding was massive. Bobby Chen reached the position. Sullivan, we need to move. That sniper's still active. He's watching for recovery team. We're exposed. Tom stood, took Sarah's photograph from Jimmy's hand carefully. Blood covered most of the image, looked at the cave mouth 1,600 yards northeast, where the sniper was probably watching. Probably satisfied, probably moving before artillery could respond. That's where he shot from, Tom asked. Yeah, range too far for rifles. We'll call artillery, but by the time shells arrive, he'll be deep in the cave. He knows the drill. Shoot and displace. We can't reach him. Tom stared at that cave, at the place where a man sat who'd just killed his best friend. Not if I shoot back first. Bobby looked confused. With what M1 can't reach that distance? M2 can. Machine guns don't hit individual targets at 1,600 yards, Tom. That's not what they're for. Maybe they should be. June 21st, night. Tom sat alone in his fighting position staring at the M2. Jimmy's blood still dried on his hands. Sarah's photograph in his pocket, the weight of promises crushing down. Jimmy had saved his life May 28th, 14 minutes under artillery applying a tourniquet while shells fell close enough to kill them both. Didn't hesitate. Just did it because that's what friendship meant. Now Jimmy was dead. Killed by a sniper at a range doctrine said was safe. Killed doing everything right. Doctrine hadn't saved him. Doctrine had killed him by being inadequate. Jimmy's last words echoed. Don't let them die the same way. Fix it. Not on my life. On theirs. Tom had promised. Promised on Jimmy's death he'd find a way. Would prove machine guns could hit individuals at ranges the manual called theoretical. Would test whether physics matched doctrine. Would break rules if breaking rules saved lives. Around midnight, Bobby Chen crawled into the position. Sullivan, you need sleep. Can't sleep. Thinking about Morales. Thinking about what he asked me to do. Which was what? Use the M2 for precision shooting. Hit individual targets at long range. Kill that sniper who killed him. Bobby was quiet, then said, "Oh yeah, Manuel says machine guns don't work that way." Manuel said Jimmy was safe in a protected observation post. Manuel was wrong. You're actually thinking about trying this breaking doctrine could get you court-martialed. Could get people killed if it doesn't work. Let me tell you about my brother Daniel, Bobby said, pulled a worn letter from his pocket. Died at Tarawa, November 1943. 21, Marine Corporal. This was his last letter. Came 2 days before he died. Bobby read by moonlight. Doctrine says advance in waves toward Japanese positions. Provides covering fire while next wave moves forward. We followed doctrine perfectly. Advanced exactly how training taught us. Japanese machine guns cut us down crossing the reef. Watched friends die following procedure that didn't account for how exposed we'd be. If I don't make it home, it won't be because I didn't follow doctrine. It'll be because doctrine was wrong for this situation. Bobby folded the letter. He died 2 days later doing exactly what doctrine said. Following orders, advancing in waves. Doctrine assumed covering fire would suppress Japanese guns. Doctrine was wrong. Daniel paid for that wrongness with his life. When Morales died today following doctrine that said he was protected, I saw Daniel again. Another good Marine doing everything right and dying because right doesn't match reality. You want to try shooting precision with M2? I'll help you. Doctrine can go to hell. I'll risk court-martial. I'll die court-martialed in a month instead of following doctrine and dead. Tom looked at Bobby. Means modifying the M2, mounting a scope, treating it like a rifle instead of a machine gun. Total violation of regulations. Morales saved your life. You promised him you'd try. That's worth more than regulations written by people who never had to watch friends die following those regulations. They worked through the night, retrieved a damaged Springfield sniper rifle from the armory. Scope was intact. Mounted the scope to the M2's receiver using improvised brackets from strap metal and screws. Ugly, but functional. Tom studied Japanese positions by moonlight through field glasses, made sketches showing every landmark, calculated distances using map coordinates, created firing data card with estimated ranges to every cave and tree line where snipers operated, calculated bullet drop for each distance, estimated wind corrections. By 3 a.m., everything was ready. The M2 had a scope. Tom had range calculations. They had a plan. Tomorrow at dawn, Tom would test whether theory matched reality, would attempt something no Marine had tried before, would honor the promise made to a dying friend who'd asked him to fix what doctrine couldn't fix. At 3:40 a.m., Tom whispered to the darkness where he imagined Jimmy might somehow hear. I'm going to try, Jimmy. Going to prove you were right. Going to fix it so no more Marines die at ranges we can reach. But doctrine says we can't. I owe you my life. This is how I pay that debt. By keeping the promise you asked for with your last breath. Tomorrow, June 22nd at 6:47 a.m., everything would change. An Iowa farm boy would fire a single shot from a machine gun at a target 1,600 yards away. Would miss by 6 inches. Would adjust calculations. Would try again. Would prove that questioning fundamental assumptions saved more lives than following orders perfectly. Would honor Jimmy Morales by breaking every rule that needed breaking to keep Marines alive. The work would matter. The credit wouldn't. That's exactly how both of them would have wanted it. The first shot came at exactly 6:47 in the morning on June 22nd, 1944. Tom settled behind the M2 with the improvised scope mounted awkwardly to the receiver. Bobby Chen loaded the ammunition belt with one tracer every 5th round so Tom could observe his shots and make corrections. Lieutenant William Cross stood 20 yards back, watching with skeptical interest, but allowing the attempt because 3 days of Japanese sniper fire had killed enough Marines to justify trying something unconventional. Through the scope, Tom could see Japanese positions with startling clarity. The cave mouth 1,600 yards northeast where Jimmy's killer operated. Movement visible in the shadows. An enemy soldier carrying an Arisaka rifle with its own telescopic sight. The same sniper, moving casually because he believed Americans couldn't reach him at this distance. Tom had spent the night calculating. Bullet drop at 1,600 yards, approximately 8 feet. Wind light this morning, maybe 5 miles per hour left to right. Wind drift, approximately 2 feet. Time of flight, 1.7 seconds. The mathematics were straightforward if you understood ballistics. The execution was harder because 84 pounds of machine gun weren't designed for precision work. He adjusted the elevation mechanism, cranking it to account for 8 feet of drop, adjusted windage for 2 feet of drift, centered the crosshairs on the Japanese sniper's chest, accounting for all corrections, took a deep breath like his father taught him, hunting whitetail, let half of it out, squeeze the trigger gently the way you squeeze when you don't want to disturb the weapon. The M2 fired once, single sharp crack that echoed across the valley. Not a burst, not suppressive fire. One carefully aimed shot treating a machine gun like a precision rifle. Through the scope, Tom watched the tracer arc through humid morning air. Red streak cutting across green jungle canopy. The bullet struck the fallen log 6 inches left of the Japanese sniper. Wood exploded in a shower of splinters. The enemy soldier froze, clearly stunned that American fire had just reached him. He looked around frantically, unable to comprehend how rounds had traveled 1,600 yards to where doctrine said he was safe. After several seconds of visible confusion, he scrambled backward into the cave mouth, abandoning his rifle position entirely. Gone. Rattled. Understanding suddenly that his sanctuary wasn't secure. Bobby stared at Tom with something approaching amazement. Jesus, Tom, you almost got him. Almost. Tom was already making mental adjustments. 6 inches left at 1,600 yards. Maybe quarter-minute windage correction. Shot was close enough to prove the concept works. M2 can reach targets at ranges where enemy feels safe. Just need to adjust holds. Lieutenant Cross walked over, examining the distant ridge through his binoculars. The Japanese positions that had been active all morning were now silent. Enemy forces apparently rattled by the realization that 1,600 yards wasn't the protective barrier they'd assumed. Corporal, that target was 1,600 yards away. You put a round within inches of him using a machine gun. That shouldn't be possible according to every manual I've ever read. Physics says it's possible, sir. Just needed someone willing to test whether theory matched reality. Cross lowered his binoculars, studying Tom. How many more shots would you need to achieve consistent accuracy at that range? 3 to 5 shots to perfect the holds, sir. After that, should be able to engage individual targets reliably. Cross made a decision that would change Pacific tactics. Continue testing, document your technique. If you can consistently hit targets at extended ranges, we'll implement this across the battalion. I don't care what the manual says about machine gun employment. Results matter. Doctrine adapts when combat proves it wrong. Bobby said quietly, "Sir, the manual says machine guns are for area suppression only. The manual also says a lot of things that this war has proven inadequate. If Corporal Sullivan can hit individuals at 1,600 yards consistently, then we have a capability no one anticipated. That changes how we fight. I'm not going to argue with results that keep Marines alive." Over the next 4 days, Tom perfected precision shooting with the M2. Not easy work. The weapon weighed 84 pounds. Recoil was significant even from single shots. Barrel heated quickly, requiring careful ammunition management. The improvised scope mounting needed constant adjustment. But the Iowa farm boy who'd learned patience hunting deer applied that same patience to this problem. June 23rd, 2:15 in the afternoon. Japanese observer at 1,450 yards directing mortar fire on American positions. Tom engaged. 3 shots. First missed high by 2 feet. Second missed right by 1 foot. Third impacted the target's center mass. The observer went down. Mortar fire stopped immediately. Enemy crew apparently unwilling to continue without forward observation. Lieutenant Cross watched through binoculars. That's 3 rounds to kill at 1,450 yards. Traditional machine gun employment would have fired 200 rounds, suppressing that general area. Your hit rate is exponentially higher. Ammunition efficiency alone justifies this technique. June 24th, 8:30 in the morning. Through binoculars, Marines observed Japanese forces changing movement patterns in response to the precision fire. Soldiers who'd previously moved casually between positions now sprinted in short panic bursts. Observation posts that had been manned continuously were suddenly abandoned for hours at a time. The enemy recognized a threat existed, but didn't understand its nature. American machine guns weren't supposed to hit individuals at extended range, but somehow they were. and that violation of expected doctrine was creating psychological impact beyond the physical casualties. June 25th, 11 in the morning. Private Eddie Martinez from a neighboring heavy weapons crew approached Tom's position. Young kid from New Mexico, good soldier, smart enough to recognize innovation when he saw it. "Sullivan, we heard what you're doing, teaching M2 to snipe, basically. Can you teach us? We got Japanese targets at 1,500 yards we can't reach with rifles." Tom explained the technique while Bobby took notes. Range estimation using landmarks and map coordinates, ballistics calculations for bullet drop at various distances, wind reading from vegetation movement and smoke drift, scope mounting procedures if optical sights were available, or using iron sights with massive elevation adjustment if not, ammunition management to prevent barrel overheating. Target selection focusing on high-value enemies like snipers, machine gunners, and forward observers. Martinez absorbed everything. By evening, his crew was attempting precision shots. By the next morning, two other crews had started experimenting with the technique. Innovation spreading organically, not through official channels or formal training, soldier to soldier, problem to solution. The way real tactical adaptation happened when field forces were empowered to think instead of just follow orders. June 26th, 4:45 in the afternoon. The engagement that would convince skeptics throughout the battalion that precision machine gun employment was more than just lucky shooting. Japanese machine gun team was setting up a Type 99 light machine gun in a position commanding the main American supply route, 1,700 yards from Tom's position. The enemy crew worked methodically, apparently confident they were beyond American small arms range, taking their time to emplace the weapon properly because doctrine said machine guns at this distance were safe from rifles and American machine guns only suppressed areas, not individuals. Tom studied the target for 20 minutes through his scope, waiting for predictable patterns. The Japanese gunner had to lean left to aim down the slope toward Marine positions, created a small target zone, maybe 18 inches of exposed torso, but predictable. Every time he prepared to sight the weapon, he leaned the same direction, presenting the same silhouette. Tom calculated holds. 1,700 yards meant approximately 9.5 feet of bullet drop. Wind was moderate, right to left, maybe 8 miles per hour. Wind drift approximately 3.5 feet. Time of flight, 1.85 seconds. When the Japanese gunner leaned into his firing position, Tom was ready, had already adjusted for range and wind. Crosshairs centered on the exact spot where the enemy soldier's chest would appear. The gunner leaned. Tom fired. The .50 caliber round struck the Japanese gunner in the upper chest. The massive bullet's kinetic energy was still sufficient at 1,700 yards to kill instantly. The impact threw him backward into his assistant gunner, disrupting the entire emplacement effort. The surviving crew members scrambled for cover, abandoning the weapon and fleeing deeper into the ridge complex. The engagement was witnessed by an entire rifle platoon that had been pinned down by that Japanese machine gun's harassing fire. Word of the shot spread through the battalion within hours. Marines who'd been skeptical about precision machine gun employment became believers. Requests started coming from other units for similar fire support. But success brought new challenges that Tom hadn't anticipated. The Japanese had been watching, had been studying, had recognized the threat posed by long-range American machine gun fire. Now they began responding with their own precision capabilities. July 2nd, 6:30 in the morning. Tom settled behind his M2, beginning the daily observation routine that had become standard, scanning Japanese positions for targets, looking for movement that indicated snipers or observers or machine gun crews. Suddenly, a bullet cracked past his head. Close, very close. Buried itself in the sandbags 2 inches from his right shoulder. The shot had come from a concealed position approximately 1,400 yards northwest. Japanese sniper with a scoped Arisaka. Professional shooter. Patient. Deadly. Bobby dropped flat beside the gun. They've got us ranged. That's not random fire. They've identified our position and assigned counter-sniper team to neutralize us. A second bullet struck the coral parapet directly in front of their position. Chips of stone flew. The Japanese clearly knew where Tom was and were attempting to kill him before he could relocate. Entirely predictable response that Tom realized he should have anticipated. By maintaining a fixed firing position for 10 days, He'd given the enemy ample opportunity to study his location and plan countermeasures. The immediate problem was tactical. Tom's crew had spent days perfecting range cards and sight settings for this specific position. Moving the 84-pound M2 and its tripod to an alternate location would require at least an hour of setup time to reestablish accurate firing data. During that hour, Japanese positions would be free to operate without harassment from precision fire. But staying in place meant accepting continued sniper fire that would eventually find its mark. That would eventually kill him, or Bobby, or both. The mathematics were simple. Snipers rarely missed forever. Lieutenant Cross crawled into the position 30 minutes later, bringing reports from forward observers. They've got at least 2 sniper teams working your area, one firing from that ridge complex northwest, another somewhere in the tree line northeast. Probably Type 99s with scopes, maybe 4 power optics. You've made yourself a priority target. The tactical situation had fundamentally changed. For 10 days, Tom had enjoyed the luxury of engaging targets that couldn't effectively return fire. Japanese soldiers had been armed with weapons that couldn't reach his position, giving him decisive advantage. But now the enemy had responded by deploying their own long-range precision shooters, turning the engagement into a genuine duel where both sides possessed lethal capability. Tom and Bobby spent the morning of July 2nd and all of July 3rd constructing a decoy position 50 yards east of their actual firing point. Using spare sandbags, camouflage netting, and a damaged M2 barrel, they created a convincing duplicate of their machine gun emplacement, complete with a helmet positioned to simulate a gunner's head. Construction had to be done during periods when Japanese observation was limited, crawling on hands and knees to avoid silhouetting themselves against the ridge. The real M2 was relocated to a depression in the coral reef that provided natural protection from the northwest, but maintained clear fields of fire toward primary target areas. The new position required completely recalculating all range data and wind corrections. Available space was more cramped than their original emplacement, but it offered the crucial advantage of being unexpected. Japanese snipers would be aiming at coordinates that no longer contained American personnel. July 3rd, 10:15 in the morning, the moment that nearly ended everything. The moment Tom understood that innovation carried costs that couldn't always be calculated in advance. Tom was behind the M2 in the new position, through his scope observing the Japanese ridgeline for targets, completely focused on a distant cave-in mouth 1,500 yards away where enemy movement was visible. Calculating wind, adjusting elevation, finger on trigger preparing to engage. The bullet passed 1 inch from Tom's left eye. So close he felt the shockwave. So close the heat from the round burned his cheek. So close that if he'd pulled the trigger half a second earlier, his head would have been positioned 1 inch differently and he'd be dead. The round embedded in the sandbag behind his head with a sound like a hammer striking steel. Tom's entire body froze. Combat instinct screaming to get down, but his brain was still processing what had just happened. The Japanese counter-sniper had nearly killed him, had come within 1 inch of ending his life, had fired from a position Tom hadn't identified despite all his scanning and observation. Bobby was screaming, "Sullivan, get down now!" Tom dropped behind cover, heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat, hands shaking uncontrollably. Kept feeling that phantom heat on his cheek where the bullet had passed. Kept seeing in his mind what would have happened if his timing had been different. Brain exploding. Death instant. Jimmy's promise unfulfilled. That night, July 3rd, Tom sat in his fighting position, unable to sleep. Kept feeling that heat on his cheek. Kept replaying the moment. 1 inch. Half a second different timing. The mathematics of death were that precise and that random. Bobby found him around midnight. "You okay?" "No, I'm not okay. That round missed by 1 inch, Bobby. 1 inch. If I'd been leaning different or pulled trigger half second earlier, I'd be dead." "But you're not dead. This time. What about next time? We've been doing this 12 days. Every day I expose myself longer sighting targets. Every day, Japanese snipers study my patterns. Eventually one won't miss. Eventually the mathematics catch up." "So what are you saying? Stop doing it?" Tom showed Sarah's photograph stained with Jimmy's blood that he still carried. "He asked me to fix it. He saved my life and asked me to save others. I promised. But what if keeping that promise gets me killed? What if innovation is just suicide by breaking doctrine?" Bobby was quiet for a moment, then said, My brother Daniel wrote in his last letter that following orders when orders are wrong makes you part of the problem. But he also wrote that trying something and failing is different than not trying at all. Morales didn't ask you to die for this. He asked you to try. There's a difference. You've already proved the concept works. 7 confirmed kills. Entire Japanese battalion changed their tactics. Other Marine crews adopting the technique. Innovation is successful. Now, question is whether you continue exposing yourself or whether we find smarter way to employ this capability. What's smarter? Decoy position work this morning. Japanese sniper fired 3 shots at the dummy emplacement. We're relocated. They're shooting at ghosts. We keep moving. Never fire from same position twice. Use mobility instead of static defense. Make them hunt us while we hunt them. Tom considered that. Mobile precision shooting means losing prepared positions, means recalculating ranges constantly. Harder to achieve accuracy, but keeps you alive. Dead innovators don't save lives. Living ones do. Morales wouldn't want you dying to keep a promise to him. He'd want you surviving long enough to help others. Tom decided that night to continue the mission but change tactics. Would rotate between 3 prepared positions. Would never fire more than 5 shots from a single location before moving. Would make Japanese snipers guess where he was. Trade some accuracy for survival because staying alive long enough to make a difference mattered more than perfect shooting from a position that would get him killed. July 4th, 10:15 a.m. The decoy proved its worth. Japanese sniper fired at the dummy position. 3 rapid shots hitting sandbags in the helmet. Tom was in his actual position 50 yards away. Could locate the muzzle flash through his scope. Position in a boulder cluster roughly 1,500 yards northwest. Tom returned fire. Single carefully aimed round. The shot struck within inches of the target, sending up a spray of rock fragments that forced the enemy sniper to abandon his position immediately. Proved the mobility concept worked. Japanese were hunting wrong locations while Tom operated from positions they hadn't identified. By July 5th, 6 M2 crews across the battalion were attempting precision shooting with varying degrees of success. Some crews had natural shooters who achieved consistent hits at 1,400 to 1,600 yards. Others struggled with ballistics calculations or wind reading. But even partial success created massive psychological impact on Japanese forces who now faced potential precision fire from multiple positions scattered across 2 miles of front. Enemy movement patterns became increasingly restricted. Japanese soldiers were afraid to expose themselves even at ranges previously considered safe. Observation posts were minimally manned. Supply movement was relegated to darkness. American innovation had created a zone of fire superiority extending far beyond traditional small arms range. July 6th, 2:35 in the afternoon. The shot that would represent both peak achievement and practical limit of the precision machine gun concept. Japanese machine gun team was positioning a Type 99 in a cave mouth at an estimated 1,850 yards. Just at the extreme edge of the M2's theoretical effective capability. The target was barely visible even through Tom's 8 power scope. Appeared as little more than a shadow in the cave opening. Distance was so great that atmospheric conditions became factors Tom had never had to account for at shorter ranges. The shot required calculations at the absolute limit of what was possible. Bullet dropped nearly 12 feet at this distance. Wind conditions moderate, maybe 10 miles per hour crosswind, which meant approximately 4 feet of drift. Time of flight, 2.1 seconds. During that time, the bullet would be affected by wind humidity, temperature gradients, even the curvature of its trajectory through air of varying density. Tom spent 15 minutes studying the target through his scope, waiting for the Japanese gunner to position himself consistently enough to provide a predictable aim point. Watching patterns. Every time the gunner prepared to fire, he leaned left to sight down the slope, created a 12-inch target zone, small, distant, but theoretically achievable if every calculation was perfect and conditions remained stable. Tom made his calculations, cranked elevation to maximum, adjusted windage, centered his crosshairs not on the gunner, but on the cave wall where his calculations predicted the bullet would impact after accounting for drop and drift. He fired. The 50 caliber round traveled 1,850 yards in 2.1 seconds. Arcing trajectory that peaked, then descended. affected by wind that pushed it laterally, affected by gravity that pulled it down, affected by air resistance that slowed it. Physics and mathematics combining to guide 710 grains of copper, jacketed lead through space. The round impacted the cave wall directly beside the Japanese machine gun position, close enough that the concussive effect and flying rock fragments likely wounded or killed the gunner. The Type 99 went silent immediately, remained inactive for the rest of the day. Artillery observers confirmed through binoculars that the position had been abandoned with equipment scattered around the cave entrance. Bobby watched through field glasses. Tom, that was 1850 yards. That's the longest confirmed machine gun precision shot probably in Marine Corps history, maybe entire U.S. military history. Lieutenant Cross was documenting the engagement. That's approaching the absolute maximum effective range for M2 against point targets. Beyond that distance, limitations of the scope, difficulty reading wind, ammunition, dispersion make consistent accuracy impossible. Tom nodded. Proves what's possible under perfect conditions. But 1850 is the limit. Can't rely on making shots at that range. Effective precision employment remains 14 to 1700 yards for consistent results. But the engagement had proved something important. Had demonstrated that under ideal conditions, the M2 could reach targets at ranges approaching 2,000 yards. Had shown that doctrine's assumptions about machine gun limitations were fundamentally wrong when crews were willing to think differently about weapon employment. July 8th, dawn, the crisis that would test whether innovation could survive resource constraints. Bobby counted remaining .50 caliber ammunition. Tom, we have a problem. 43 rounds left, less than one belt. Where's resupply? That's the problem. Landing ships have been delayed 2 days by kamikaze attacks on the Naval Support Group. Battalion supply officer can't give an estimate when next ammunition arrives. Could be today, could be a week. Tom stared at the 43 rounds. At their current engagement rate, maybe 6 more precision shots before the M2 fell silent. All the tactical advantage built over 16 days would disappear once ammunition was exhausted. Japanese forces would recognize the opportunity immediately, would resume aggressive operations, would retake the psychological initiative that American precision fire had seized. Lieutenant Cross arrived shortly after sunrise, bringing reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. Intelligence says Japanese are massing for a counterattack. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. They're moving troops through those ridges you've been watching. Probably figured out your gun won't be shooting much longer. The enemy had clearly recognized the ammunition shortage as an opportunity. Japanese units that had been pinned in defensive positions were beginning to move more boldly, taking advantage of reduced American fire to reposition forces and prepare for offensive operations. Marines could observe increased activity in areas that had been quiet for days. Enemy soldiers moving in daylight, establishing new firing positions at ranges that should have been suicidal, but weren't because the M2 was nearly silent. Tom made the decision to conserve remaining ammunition for only the most critical targets, would abandon the harassment fire that had been so effective at disrupting enemy operations. Each shot would have to count not just tactically, but strategically, used only against targets whose elimination would have maximum impact on Japanese capabilities. 10:30 a.m. First test of this new discipline. Japanese machine gun teams setting up a Type 99 in a position commanding the main supply route to forward rifle companies. The enemy crew worked methodically, apparently confident that American long-range fire was no longer a threat. Tom had a clear shot at approximately 1,600 yards, but engaging would consume 3 to 5 of his precious remaining rounds. Bobby studied the position through field glasses. That gun can interdict the entire supply column. If they get it operational, nobody moves ammunition or medical supplies to the front companies. Tom settled behind his M2, adjusted scope for range and wind. The Japanese machine gunners were moving casually, taking their time. No reason to expect incoming fire from a position they probably assumed was out of ammunition. He fired. The .50 caliber round struck the primary gunner's center mass. Impact threw him backward into his assistant gunner, disrupting the emplacement effort. Surviving Japanese soldiers scrambled for cover, abandoning the weapon. Supply route remained open, but Tom was down to 38 rounds. The afternoon brought worse developments. Japanese forces began probing the marine perimeter with small unit attacks clearly designed to test American response capabilities. Enemy squads would advance to positions just beyond rifle range, establish temporary firing positions, engage marine outposts with aimed fire, then withdraw. The attacks were coordinated and systematic, suggesting a larger plan to identify weak points in the defensive line. Traditional doctrine called for machine gun crews to respond with sustained suppressive fire, force the enemy to withdraw while friendly forces maneuvered. But Tom couldn't afford expending limited ammunition on suppression missions that might consume 20 or 30 rounds without achieving definitive results. He was forced to watch enemy soldiers operate at ranges where his weapon could reach them. Knowing that engagement would exhaust his remaining capability, the psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. 3:40 p.m., Japanese sniper team established position at 1,400 yards, began systematically engaging Marine forward observers, killed one spotter, and wounded another within 30 minutes. The enemy marksmen were operating from a location providing excellent concealment in fields of fire, clearly planning to remain in position for an extended engagement. They represented exactly the kind of high-value target that justified expenditure of scarce ammunition. Tom engaged with 2 carefully aimed shots. Second round struck close enough to force the snipers to abandon their location. But the engagement reduced remaining ammunition to 35 rounds. Could see other Japanese positions becoming active as enemy forces sensed the reduced American fire capability. Bobby proposed a desperate solution. What if we coordinate with the other heavy weapons crews, pool our remaining ammunition, concentrate on the most critical targets, better than individual crews running out separately? The idea had merit, represented fundamental change in tactical approach. Instead of individual crew operations, the remaining machine gun teams would have to function as a coordinated precision fire unit, sharing intelligence and ammunition resources while maintaining mutually supporting positions. Logistics would be complex, required radio coordination and careful planning to avoid duplication of effort. Lieutenant Cross approved the concept immediately. Consolidate resources, coordinate targeting, make every round count across the battalion, not just individual crews. By 5 p.m., 3 M2 crews had consolidated their remaining 50 caliber ammunition into a single supply pool totaling 112 cartridges. Ammunition was distributed based on crew capability and target priority. Tom's team received 45 rounds as the most experienced precision shooters. 9:30 p.m., the Japanese counterattack began with mortar fire hitting Marine forward positions, followed by infantry probes against the perimeter at multiple points. Enemy forces moved with unusual boldness, apparently confident that American long-range fire was no longer effective. Japanese machine gun teams established positions at ranges that had been untenable just days earlier. Sniper teams began operating from locations they'd previously abandoned. Tom's response was surgical. Instead of sustained fire missions, he fired single shot at the most critical targets. Machine gun crews threatening the Marine perimeter. Sniper teams engaging American leadership. Observation posts directing enemy mortar fire. Each shot was planned and coordinated with other precision crews to maximize tactical impact while conserving ammunition. By midnight, the coordinated precision fire had broken the Japanese counterattack, forced enemy forces to withdraw to positions beyond effective range. The cost was 28 50 caliber rounds, more than half of Tom's allocation, but the Marine perimeter held. The enemy offensive collapsed. Innovation had worked, but barely, only because ammunition shortage had forced a level of tactical coordination that might never have developed under normal supply conditions. Bobby cleaned the M2 after the engagement. We got 17 rounds left. That's it. If they hit us again tomorrow, we're done. Tom stared at those 17 rounds. Then we hope resupply arrives tomorrow. Because if it doesn't, we just proved precision machine gun fire works right before we ran out of ability to use it. July 8th had demonstrated something important about innovation under resource constraints. Sometimes limitations forced adaptations that wouldn't emerge otherwise. Ammunition shortage had created coordination between crews that proved more effective than individual operations. Scarcity had forced shot discipline that maximized impact per round. Crisis had driven tactical evolution that would influence future doctrine more than unlimited resources ever could. Jimmy Morales had asked Tom to fix a broken system. July 8th proved the system could be fixed even under the worst conditions. That innovation mattered most when resources were limited and stakes were highest. That sometimes what looked like failure was actually the crucible that refined success into something stronger than original conception. Tom whispered to the darkness where Jimmy's memory lived, "I'm still trying, Jimmy. Still keeping the promise. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because that's what you asked for. Not easy solutions. Just honest effort to fix what's broken." Tomorrow would bring resupply, would bring 2,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, would restore capability. But the lessons of July 8th would endure, would become part of the doctrine being written in real time through field experimentation, would prove that innovation survived not just through success, but through the determination to continue innovating, even when resources failed and conventional wisdom said to quit. That determination was Jimmy's true legacy. Not the technique itself, but the mindset that created it. The willingness to question assumptions, to test theories, to break rules when rules were killing people, to keep trying even when trying seemed impossible. That's what would change warfare. Not just one farm boy with a machine gun, but the idea that soldiers closest to problems were often best positioned to solve them. That doctrine should serve troops, not the other way around. That innovation happened not through committees, but through courage. Tom had learned that from Jimmy, would teach it to others, would honor the promise by spreading not just the technique, but the philosophy behind it. Fix what's broken. Question what doesn't work. Try what doctrine says is impossible. Keep trying even when resources run out and conventional wisdom says quit. That was the real innovation. Everything else was just mathematics and physics applied properly. July 9th, 10 in the morning. The supply convoy reached battalion headquarters bringing 2,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. The crisis was over. Marines could breathe again, knowing their precision fire capability wasn't exhausted. But something had changed during those desperate hours of July 8th. Something that couldn't be undone by simple resupply. The psychological damage to Japanese forces was already complete. The enemy battalion had spent a week watching American precision fire reach into zones they'd believed were sanctuaries. Had spent the night of July 8th seeing their counterattack broken by coordinated machine gun fire that picked off key targets with surgical precision. Morale had shattered not from overwhelming casualties, but from the realization that nowhere offered safety anymore. Tom and Bobby restocked their ammunition, loaded fresh belts, prepared for resumed operations, but found themselves facing a strange problem. The targets were disappearing. Japanese positions that had been active for weeks were now silent. Enemy forces huddled in the deepest portions of their cave systems, emerging only at night, only when absolutely necessary, only when desperation overcame fear. Through binoculars, Marines observed enemy behavior fundamentally altered. Movement occurred only during darkness or heavy weather that limited visibility. Observation posts that had been continuously manned were now abandoned. Offensive operations had completely ceased. Resources that should have been devoted to fighting were instead diverted to digging deeper fortifications and constructing more elaborate camouflage. Lieutenant Cross studied the silent ridges through his field glasses. Precision machine gun fire has achieved strategic effect disproportionate to actual casualties inflicted. We've killed maybe 20 Japanese soldiers with this technique, but we've neutralized an entire battalion's offensive capability. They've effectively surrendered the initiative without formal surrender. That's psychological warfare at its most effective. The next 6 days passed in strange quiet. Japanese forces visible through scopes but not presenting targets. Watching the Americans. Calculating. Understanding that continuing resistance meant continuing to face precision fire that could reach them anywhere. Understanding that doctrine had lied about what was possible. Understanding that the fundamental assumptions they'd based their defensive strategy on were wrong. July 15th, 7:30 in the morning. Tom watched through his scope as white cloth appeared in a cave mouth across the ridge complex. Small piece of fabric tied to a rifle barrel, thrust cautiously into morning sunlight. Tentative, testing whether Americans would honor surrender protocols or simply shoot anyone who emerged. Then more flags appeared. Dozens. Japanese soldiers coming out of positions with their hands raised. Enemy forces had held these ridges for 3 weeks, had survived artillery bombardments that would have broken lesser men, had endured infantry assaults, but couldn't survive the psychological pressure of precision fire reaching them at ranges they'd believed safe. They weren't surrendering because ammunition was exhausted, or positions were overrun, or will was broken through conventional combat. They were surrendering because nowhere felt safe anymore, because the fundamental tactical equation had changed in ways that made continued resistance seem pointless, because innovation had achieved what brute force couldn't. Lieutenant Cross coordinated the surrender proceedings, ensuring advancing infantry maintained appropriate caution despite the white flags. Enemy forces were known to use surrender ruses, but this appeared genuine. Japanese soldiers emerged from positions showing signs of malnutrition and exhaustion. Weeks of minimal resupply, weeks of psychological pressure, weeks of understanding they were being hunted by weapons that shouldn't have been able to reach them. Tom remained at his M2 throughout the morning, maintaining overwatch even though active engagement seemed unlikely. His weapon was loaded with a fresh belt. Scope trained on the Ridge complex. Tactical situation required continued vigilance until the entire area was secured. Marine patrols moving through former enemy positions discovered the human cost. Dozens of improvised graves where Japanese soldiers had buried their dead during the 3-week siege. Many cave positions showed evidence of direct hits from .50 caliber fire. Crater patterns and bloodstains testifying to the effectiveness of precision shooting. Tom found himself studying these impact sites with mixed emotions, recognizing his own handiwork while contemplating the individual tragedies each crater represented. The afternoon brought something unexpected: Japanese prisoners being processed. One of them, a corporal who'd served as a sniper throughout the campaign. Through an interpreter, he asked to speak with the American machine gunner who'd been shooting at extended range. Wanted to understand how it was possible. They brought him to Tom's position under guard. The Japanese corporal looked tired, defeated, but still possessed the bearing of a professional soldier. Through the interpreter, he spoke. "We believed ourselves safe at 1,600 meters. Every military manual said American machine guns could not hit individual targets beyond 800 meters. We moved confidently, stood in cave mouths, observed your positions, knowing your rifles could not reach us. Then the big gun began shooting single bullets like a rifle. First time we thought luck. Second time we became concerned. Third time we understood. Americans had a weapon that reached farther than our intelligence predicted. Suddenly nowhere felt safe. We stopped moving in daylight. Abandoned observation posts we had held for weeks. Spent more time hiding than fighting. Morale collapsed not because many of us died, but because we could not find any position beyond your reach. That fear was worse than actual casualties. The fear that everywhere was a kill zone." Another prisoner spoke, a machine gunner. "I set up Type 9 at 1,700 meters thinking position was secure. American bullet killed my gunner instantly. We abandoned the weapon, never returned. After that, every time we tried to establish a position, we wondered if the American precision gun was watching. That uncertainty made us ineffective even when you weren't shooting. The psychological impact exceeded the physical danger." Lieutenant Cross documented these testimonials carefully, would include them in his after-action report. Evidence that precision machine gun fire had achieved psychological dominance far exceeding physical casualties. That innovation had changed the tactical calculus in ways that couldn't be measured simply by counting bodies. Bobby conducted an informal assessment that evening, compiling engagement records from the past 24 days. The statistics told a story that doctrine had said was impossible. Total rounds fired, 430 .50 caliber BMG cartridges. Confirmed kills, 17 individual Japanese soldiers. Probable kills and casualties from near misses and fragmentation effects. Estimated 25 additional. Hit rate approximately 10% per round fired versus traditional machine gun area suppression, which achieved maybe 0.1%. Range statistics painted an even more dramatic picture. Minimum engagement range 1,300 yards. Average engagement range 1,550 yards. Maximum confirmed kill 1,850 yards on July 6th. Ranges that every manual said were beyond effective capability for machine gun employment against individual targets. Tactical impact measured not just in casualties, but in enemy behavior modification. Japanese positions suppressed across 2 miles of ridgeline. Enemy movement restricted by 70% reduction in daylight activity. Observation posts abandoned 9 out of 12 previously active locations. Psychological effect, forcing entire battalion to modify operational approach. Innovation spread. 6 M2 crews within the battalion had adopted precision shooting techniques by July 15th. Reports coming from other units across the Marine Division indicated widespread experimentation, organic dissemination, soldier to soldier without formal instruction. Each crew developing variations based on available equipment and individual skill, but all following the same basic principle. Treat the machine gun like an enormous rifle. Calculate trajectory properly. Hit individuals at ranges doctrine said were impossible. Lieutenant Cross spent July 16th writing his formal report to regiment. The document would become the basis for changes in Marine Corps doctrine that would influence heavy weapons employment for decades. His conclusions were unambiguous. Precision employment of M2 Browning heavy machine gun against individual targets at extended range demonstrates significant tactical advantages over traditional area suppression doctrine. Single-shot engagement of high-value enemy targets achieve casualty rates exceeding 10% per round, fired representing 100-fold improvement over sustained burst fire. Psychological impact on enemy forces exceeded physical casualties. Japanese battalion modified operational behavior across entire defensive zone due to elimination of previously safe engagement ranges. Recommend immediate incorporation of precision machine gun techniques into heavy weapons training. Development of standardized optical sighting systems for M2 platforms. Creation of designated marksman positions within machine gun crews. Revision of doctrine to include precision employment as primary capability rather than supplementary. The report included detailed technical specifications, range estimation procedures, ballistics calculation methods, ammunition management protocols, coordination procedures with supporting arms, everything needed to replicate the technique across the Marine Corps. But the report also included something more important, a paragraph about the nature of innovation itself. Techniques documented herein developed through field experimentation by Corporal Thomas Sullivan, assisted by Sergeant Robert Chen, in response to specific tactical challenge. Innovation emerged from practical problem solving rather than formal doctrinal development. C suggests field forces capable of tactical innovation when empowered to question assumptions and test alternatives. Recommend fostering culture that encourages enlisted initiative rather than rigid adherence to doctrine that may be inadequate for specific combat situations. Cross understood something that many officers missed. That real innovation happened not through committees in Washington, but through corporals in fighting holes who were willing to think. That doctrine should serve troops, not the other way around. That the price of innovation was accepting that sometimes privates and corporals knew more about what worked than the people who wrote the manuals. October 1945, Tom was discharged with the rank of corporal. 2 Purple Hearts for wounds received May 28th and July 3rd. Combat Action Ribbon, Marksmanship Badge, Honorable Discharge, Train Ticket back to Iowa. No medals specifically for precision machine gun innovation. No official commendation mentioning technique development. After action reports credited field expedient modifications to standard operating procedures without naming individuals. Military bureaucracy uncomfortable, highlighting innovations that questioned established doctrine, even when those innovations saved lives. Tom returned to Iowa with a duffel bag and memories he couldn't share with people who hadn't been there. His parents were alive. The farm still operating. Everything looked the same, but Tom was different in ways that didn't show externally. December 1945. Tom traveled to El Paso finding Sarah Morales through the address Jimmy had kept. She was teaching 2nd grade, 7 months pregnant. Opened the door and saw the Marine uniform, recognized immediately what it meant. "You served with Jimmy." "Yes, ma'am, Corporal Thomas Sullivan. I was with him when he died. He asked me to give you this." He handed her the photograph stained with Jimmy's blood. Sarah looked at it for a long moment, then started crying. Quiet tears while holding the photo with both hands. Did he suffer? Tom lied because truth served no purpose. "No, ma'am, it was very fast. He didn't feel pain." "Did he talk about me?" "Constantly. Showed this photograph to everyone. Said he was planning to name the baby Thomas if it's a boy, after me. Because he wanted me there teaching his son to hunt someday. Sarah cried harder. He wrote about you in letters, his friend who understood ballistics, who he trusted completely. He saved my life first, ma'am, May 28th. Femoral artery severed. He ran through artillery fire, applied a tourniquet, kept me alive until medics arrived. I owed him everything. He asked you to do something, didn't he? In his last moments, that was Jimmy, always thinking about others. He asked me to fix a problem with how we employed weapons, Japanese snipers operating at ranges beyond our capabilities. He asked me to find a way to reach them, so they couldn't keep killing Marines safely. Did you fix it? Yes, ma'am. Used his idea in my calculations. Built precision shooting technique with a machine gun. Changed how the entire Marine Corps employs heavy weapons now. That's Jimmy's legacy. He saw the problem. I just figured out the solution. Sarah looked at the photograph, at Jimmy's face obscured by his own blood. He'd be proud. Jimmy believed in questioning assumptions when assumptions got people killed. Thank you for keeping whatever promise you made him. The baby was born January 1946. Named Thomas James Morales. Tom sent a hunting knife when the boy turned 12 with a note. Your father wanted you to learn hunting. When you're old enough, I'll teach you what he would have taught you. The years passed in the quiet rhythm of Iowa farming. Tom married Margaret in November 1947. They bought a house, had 3 children, built a life that looked normal from outside but was shadowed by memories of friends who'd died and promises that had been kept. June 22nd became a day Tom spent alone each year. Margaret understood not to ask questions. Just let him sit in the barn with his grandfather's Winchester and Jimmy's photograph and the weight of remembering. 38 years of June 22nds. 38 years of whispered conversations with a dead friend who'd asked him to fix what doctrine couldn't fix. 1950. Korean War began. Tom read newspaper articles mentioning precision machine gun techniques, now standard Marine Corps doctrine. M2 crews trained in long-range shooting. Optical sights issued. Range estimation procedures formalized. Innovation that started with Tom and Jimmy now written into training manuals taught at Camp Pendleton. Saving Marines. Tom would never meet. Fighting a war Tom wasn't part of. But techniques worked because physics didn't care about wars. 1951. Tom's son Michael was 16. Learning to hunt. Tom teaching him ballistics and wind reading. Using the same Winchester his grandfather had used. The same rifle that taught Tom to calculate trajectory at 12. Michael asked, Dad, did you do anything important in the war? Tom field dressed a deer Michael had shot at 380 yards. Helped develop new shooting techniques, precision fire with heavy weapons, changed some doctrine, saved some lives probably. Were you a hero? No, just did what needed doing. Friend of mine asked me to fix a problem. I tried, worked out. That's all war is. Fixing problems and losing friends and hoping you fix more than you lose. Mom says you got medals. Medals don't make heroes, they make paperwork. Real heroism is seeing a problem and having courage to try fixing it even when everyone says it's impossible. Friend named Jimmy taught me that. What happened to him? Japanese sniper killed him at 1,600 yards. Range everyone said was safe. Jimmy asked me with his last words to prove everyone wrong about that range. So I did. Built a technique that reached 1,800 yards. Taught other Marines, changed doctrine. Jimmy never got credit because he died before proving the concept. But the innovation was his idea. I just made it work. That doesn't make you angry that he got no credit? Tom looked at his son. Credit doesn't matter. Results matter. Marines in Korea are using techniques Jimmy thought of. They don't know his name, don't need to. They just need techniques to work so they survive. That's the only credit that counts, people going home to families. July 1975, phone call from Bobby Chen's wife. Mr. Sullivan, I'm sorry to call. Bobby passed away yesterday. Lung cancer. He wanted me to tell you something. He said to tell you that he never regretted helping you break doctrine in 1940. Said his brother Daniel would be proud that someone finally questioned whether following orders when orders were wrong was right. Said working with you was the honor of his life. Tom sat alone after hanging up, thinking about Bobby, about how many times innovation required not just someone willing to try, but someone willing to authorize trying. Bobby had risked court-martial letting Tom break doctrine. Could have said no, could have followed regulations. Instead chose to support innovation because his brother had died following regulations that didn't work. June 22, 1982, 38th anniversary. Tom was 64, sitting alone in the farmhouse. Every June 22nd, he spent the day alone remembering. Remembers Jimmy showing Sarah's photograph, planning hunting trips, saving Tom's life, dying asking Tom to fix it. Remembers Bobby saying doctrine can go to hell. Remembers Lieutenant Cross deciding results mattered more than manuals. Remembers 430 rounds fired over 24 days. 17 Japanese soldiers killed. 600 or more Americans who didn't die because Japanese snipers couldn't operate with impunity. Doctrine that changed because someone questioned assumptions. He opened the drawer. Jimmy's photograph stained with blood. Sarah had given it back to Tom in 1965 when Thomas James Morales graduated high school. Said this belongs to the man who kept Jimmy's promise. Tom whispered to a man dead 38 years. Jimmy, I kept your promise. Fixed the system, changed doctrine, saved lives. Marines across the Pacific used your idea. Korea, Vietnam, everywhere 50 caliber machine guns are deployed. Your legacy, even though nobody knows your name. That's how it should be. Work matters. Credit doesn't. August 15th, 1982. Tom died age 64. Heart attack while working the farm. Alone in a field. Quick death. Found by his son Michael 3 hours later. The obituary in the local paper was 4 sentences. Thomas Sullivan, 64, of rural Iowa, died August 15th. Veteran World War II U.S. Marine Corps Pacific Theater. Operated family farm 1945 through 1982. Survived by wife Margaret, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. No mention of innovation. No mention of precision machine gun techniques. No mention of doctrine changes or lives saved. Just simple obituary for an Iowa farmer who happened to serve in a war. The funeral was attended by family and neighbors. Nobody from the Marines. Nobody who knew what Tom had done in June and July 1944. Nobody who understood how questioning assumptions had changed warfare. That's exactly how Tom wanted it. Told Margaret years ago, when I die, don't mention the war stuff. Just say I was a farmer who did his duty. That's enough. The year 2020, 80 years after Saipan. Tom Sullivan dead 42 years. Bobby Chen dead 49 years. Jimmy Morales dead 84 years. At Quantico Marine Base, a classroom holds 30 instructors learning advanced marksmanship doctrine. Gunnery Sergeant Maria Torres teaches heavy weapons employment. She displays a slide. Precision machine gun employment. Historical development. Precision employment of M2 Browning against individual targets at extended range is now standard Marine Corps doctrine. Started with field innovation by an enlisted Marine in 1944 Saipan, who questioned whether machine guns could only suppress areas. Marine's name was Corporal Thomas Sullivan. Records show he achieved 17 confirmed kills at ranges 1,300 to 1,850 yards. Forced a Japanese battalion to modify tactics. Proved machine guns could engage individuals if crews employed proper ballistics calculations. Sullivan's techniques spread throughout the Pacific Theater. By 1945, standard operating procedure. By 1950, Korean War written into formal doctrine. Today, every Marine machine gun crew is trained in these methods. Sullivan received no medals for the innovation. Never promoted beyond corporal. Discharged 1945, returned to Iowa. Farming died 1982. Most Marines using his techniques don't know his name. Don't need to. They just need the techniques to work so they survive. A young lieutenant raises his hand. Sergeant, why wasn't Sullivan recognized formally? Because in 1944, his innovation violated established doctrine. Manual said machine guns for area suppression only. Sullivan ignored the manual, proved the manual wrong. Military bureaucracy is uncomfortable with enlisted men being right when officers were wrong. So innovation was documented, but the innovator's name was minimized in reports. Classic military pattern: field forces develop solutions. Solutions work. Solutions get adopted. Credit goes to the system, not individuals. Sullivan probably didn't care. Marines alive because of his techniques is the only recognition that matters. She advances to the next slide. Black and white photograph. Tom Sullivan, age 26, behind the M2 with improvised scope. Saipan 1944. This is Sullivan, only known photograph of him with the weapon system he revolutionized. Image found in National Archives 2018. No caption, just a file number. Took a historian 2 years to identify him through cross-referencing unit records. That's how innovation gets remembered. System changes, doctrine adapts, names disappear, but techniques endure because physics doesn't care who discovered it. At the National Archives, a historian named Dr. James Chen researches Marine Corps tactical innovations. He's the grandson of Bobby Chen, discovers references in captured Japanese documents to American precision gun that shoots one bullet, cross-references with U.S. after-action reports, finds Lieutenant Cross's July 1944 report. Report details precision techniques, but minimizes individual attribution. Dr. Chen searches for the personnel involved, finds Tom Sullivan's name buried in an appendix, no detail, just Corporal T. Sullivan, precision shooting techniques originator. Further research reveals Bobby Chen listed as assistant gunner. Dr. Chen realizes he's reading about his own grandfather, who died when James was an infant, grandfather who never spoke about the war to family. He publishes a paper in 2024, Forgotten Innovations, How Enlisted Marines Changed Pacific War Doctrine Through Field Experimentation. Paper details Sullivan and Chen collaboration. Jimmy Morales' death as catalyst. Technique development and spread. Statistical impact. Post-war doctrine incorporation. His conclusion. Sullivan and Chen represent a pattern throughout military history. Enlisted personnel closest to tactical problems often best positioned to develop solutions. But military recognition systems favor officers over enlisted. Result is that people who change warfare get forgotten while doctrine they created becomes standard. Sullivan died 1982, unknown. Techniques he pioneered still taught at Quantico. Marines worldwide use his methods without knowing his name. Perhaps that's appropriate. He didn't innovate for recognition. He innovated because a friend asked him to fix a broken system. System got fixed. That's the only legacy that matters. The paper is published in an academic journal, read by approximately 200 historians and military analysts. No mainstream coverage. Sullivan remains forgotten except by specialists studying tactical innovation. At Quantico Marine Corps Museum, the Pacific War Exhibit Hall holds a display case labeled Heavy Weapons Innovation. Inside sits an M2 Browning from 1944. Improvised scope mount, ammunition belts, range cards, the black and white photograph of Sullivan behind his gun. The placard reads, Precision Machine Gun Employment. During 1944 Saipan campaign, Marine machine gun crews developed techniques for engaging individual targets at extended ranges using M2 Browning heavy machine gun. Innovation emerged from tactical necessity when Japanese snipers operated beyond American rifle range. Techniques included single-shot firing versus traditional burst optical sighting systems, ballistics calculations for bullet drop, and wind drift coordination between crews for targeting. Results demonstrated 100-fold improvement in ammunition effectiveness. Psychological impact on enemy forces exceeded physical casualties. Techniques quickly spread throughout Pacific theater, becoming standard doctrine by 1945. Innovation originated with enlisted Marines in forward positions who questioned conventional assumptions about weapon employment. Names of original innovators lost to time. Techniques they developed remain foundational to modern Marine Corps heavy weapons doctrine. The display attracts minimal attention. Most museum visitors focus on larger exhibits about major battles. Small display about how an Iowa farm boy changed doctrine by questioning whether the manual was right. Most people walk past without reading. In rural Iowa, a cemetery section reserved for veterans holds Tom Sullivan's headstone, simple gray granite. Thomas Sullivan, 1918 to 1982, Corporal U.S. Marine Corps, World War II, Pacific Theater. Beloved husband and father. He questioned assumptions. The grave is visited occasionally by children and grandchildren. Nobody else. Most people walking through the cemetery don't notice it. Just another veteran's marker among hundreds. Nothing indicating the man buried there changed how Marines employ heavy weapons worldwide. At Camp Pendleton Library, the military history section holds Dr. Chen's 2024 book, Tactical Innovation in Combat, Enlisted Contributions to Marine Corps Doctrine, 1941 to 1945. Library card shows checked out twice. Book currently sits on shelf unread. dust gathering on the spine, surrounded by volumes about famous battles and generals. Chapter 7 is titled The Farm Boy and the Machine Gun, Sullivan and Chen at Saipan. Details the complete story. Jimmy Morales as Catalyst. Bobby Chen's brother lost at Tarawa. Tom Sullivan's ballistics calculations. June 22nd through July 15th, engagements. Statistical impact. Doctrine change. Post-war lives. Deaths in obscurity. The book is comprehensive, meticulously researched, properly documented, read by almost nobody. Dr. Chen dedicated the book to Corporal Thomas Sullivan and Sergeant Robert Chen. One my grandfather, the other his friend. Both forgotten by history, they changed. Both would prefer it that way because they didn't innovate for recognition. They innovated because Marines were dying and doctrine didn't offer solutions. Perfect summary of military innovation. Techniques endure. Systems adapt. Names disappear. Books are written for specialists. History is forgotten by everyone else. Tom Sullivan died in 1982 thinking nobody would remember. He was mostly right, except for one historian, the grandson of his assistant gunner, who spent 5 years researching what his grandfather never discussed, who published a book almost nobody reads, who ensured the story got documented even if documentation sits gathering dust on a forgotten library shelf. That's military history, not what everyone remembers, what specialists preserve. The pattern of innovation repeats throughout military history. Enlisted personnel closest to tactical problems develop field solutions. Solutions work. Solutions spread organically. Eventually, solutions get adopted into formal doctrine. Then innovators get forgotten while innovations become standard. Tom Sullivan questioned whether machine guns could only suppress areas. Jimmy Morales died asking him to fix a broken system. Bobby Chen authorized breaking doctrine because his brother died following doctrine. Together, they proved 50 caliber machine guns could engage individual targets at 1,800 yards when every manual said impossible. 17 Japanese killed. 600 Americans lived. Doctrine changed. Names disappeared. That's the pattern. That's military innovation. Not glamorous, not recognized, just necessary. What Jimmy Morales knew on June 20th, 1944 as he died was that regulations written by people who never faced a problem can't account for the problem's reality. That manuals tested under ideal conditions fail under combat conditions. That doctrine, assuming enemy behavior, doesn't adapt when the enemy adapts constantly. His last act was asking Tom to question, to test whether physics matched doctrine, to break rules when rules were killing Marines. That's leadership from a corporal who'll never get leadership credit. That's innovation from a soldier who died before seeing innovation work. That's legacy that matters more than medals or promotions or recognition. What Bobby Chen risked when he authorized Tom's experiment was court-martial demotion, career destruction. He risked them anyway because his brother Daniel died following orders at Tarawa. Because Daniel's last letter said following orders, when orders are wrong, makes you part of the problem. Because Bobby understood that sometimes regulations kill more Marines than enemy fire. That's courage. Not shooting accurately, but authorizing others to shoot when doctrine says don't shoot. The price of innovation is measured not just in success, but in risk. Tom survived July 3rd when a bullet missed his head by 1 inch. Survived by luck, not skill. Survived July 8th ammunition shortage by coordination, not preparation. Survived 24 days breaking doctrine and barely escaped with his life. Innovation carries cost. Sometimes career. Sometimes court-martial. Sometimes life. Tom paid in constant danger. Paid in 38 years of remembering friends who died. Paid in never fully explaining to family why June 22nd each year meant sitting alone. 600 Marines benefited from Tom's willingness to pay that price. None knew his name. None needed to. They just needed techniques to work, so they went home. Which matters more, recognition or results, credit or capability? Names remembered or lives saved? Tom Sullivan answered that question June 22nd, 1944, at 6:47 a.m. when he fired his first precision shot. Answered it again every day for 38 years when he didn't seek recognition. Answered it finally August 15th, 1982, when he died quietly without telling anyone what he'd accomplished. Recognition doesn't matter. Results matter. Marines worldwide use Sullivan's techniques without knowing his name. That's perfect legacy for a man who didn't want credit, just wanted broken systems fixed. Somewhere today at Camp Pendleton, an instructor teaches precision machine gun employment. Somewhere in the world, Marines deploy with M2 crews trained in long-range precision fire. Somewhere in future conflicts, Marines will use Sullivan's techniques, saving lives of soldiers not yet born. That's legacy, not names remembered, not recognition granted, not credit assigned, just techniques enduring, just doctrine adapting, just Marines going home because 80 years ago, an Iowa farm boy questioned whether the manual was complete. On June 22, 1944, at 6:47 a.m., Tom Sullivan proved innovation mattered more than doctrine. That questioning assumptions saved more lives than following orders. That sometimes broken systems only get fixed when someone has courage to try fixing them, despite everyone saying it's impossible. Jimmy Morales asked him to try. Bobby Chen let him try. Tom tried. It worked. 600 Marines went home. Names disappeared. Work endured. That's the only legacy that matters.